Live.
Are you a diver and you maybe even take photos or videos underwater? Then this live stream is for you. Because we believe that everyone who takes images underwater is already an ocean ambassador. And to make sure that you can do your job properly and inspire people out there to care for the ocean and eventually protect it, we collected your questions beforehand on social media. And we're going to ask those questions to creative professionals from the industry. And we are sending live from the world's largest water sports show here in Düsseldorf, the boat show, which is taking place from 18th to 26th of January. You're going to find us live in Hall 11 at the Pixel World workshop stage. Make sure you follow us on social media, on the Behind the Mask Facebook page and on the Behind the Mask YouTube channel. Turn on your notifications and most importantly, ask your questions down in the comments, and maybe we will even be able to pick up your question and forward your question to our guest. And one more thing, by leaving us a comment, you already have a chance to win amazing prizes. Hey everyone, this is Macro Monday. Amazing. I rather eat fire coral than to shoot macro is Hamdan's sticker on his camera. Hamdan, really why is that, and what's wrong with macro?
There's absolutely nothing wrong with macro. I really like Evan. I don't want to make enemies. I just want to learn about macro, which is why I'm here now.
Okay, cool.
I'm glad you put him on a separate couch, because that ain't cool.
Hey Evan, good to have you here.
Thank you.
What is so special about the small things?
With macro, I think it's the challenge. I think it's the ability to be creative with your lighting and the unknown. I've been shooting for a very long time and constantly seeing new species, species that I've already seen, being able to light them in a new creative way. And again, it's the challenge. It is. It can be very frustrating at times, but if you get the shot, it can be very rewarding.
And how did you get into all of this? Are you doing this like from a very young age? And I don't know, do you have a connection to diving like from a very young age? Or?
Growing up, my family did have a dive shop. So my parents were shooters, and they both did still photography. But diving really didn't interest me. I looked at it, I looked at the way they dressed and those funky suits, and it just wasn't something that I wanted to be a part of. So, really?
The funky suits?
Really?
There we go.
Look at that.
You look very excited about diving right
Exactly,
here.
And that's what I'm saying. So diving didn't necessarily appeal to me at an early age. I wanted to do, the normal things that teenagers do, football and cars and girls and things like that. But over time, I realized that it's not just being underwater, it's the entire lifestyle. And it quickly became very addicting, and it's something that I became passionate about. So, by the way, if you want one of those gold suits, I think she might still have it, so I'll get it for you.
You know, I'm connected to your mom on Facebook, so I can deal with it.
I'm sorry.
Cool. Hey, let's have a look before we actually dig a little bit deeper into how things are done, because we take the opportunity now to actually bombard you with questions.
Okay.
Because we have tons of macro photography and in your case videography questions, and we are super curious to learn a little bit about the techniques behind it, because with macro you mostly just see the end product. You never really see anyone how is it done, what kind of equipment do you need, and what is the setting about everything. You don't see much of it. Because in the macro world, there's not a diver swimming by. Also, the cameraman in macro shooting is never really part of the story and things like this. So there's a lot of things that need to be revealed. But before we do that, I think we just have a look at some of the stuff that you've been doing.
Sure.
I think it is the first one is the Bali
Close up.
What's special about this one?
It was one of my first big projects. I didn't even own a camera system at the time. I borrowed a camera from my parents and just kind of discovered Bali as a dive destination for good muck diving. And at the time, I wasn't able to shoot manual focus. I didn't have external monitors. I didn't own a tripod. Didn't know much, but I just spent some time underwater and kind of pieced stuff together and threw it out to the dive industry to see how it was received.
Cool. So that is a good opportunity to synchronize with people who are starting or thinking about getting into this. This is basically your first attempt with not a lot of experience and anything, but still putting something together on a very simple setup. Interesting. Let's have a look.
Sure.
This is where I'm supposed to say something profound, something eloquent about foreign lands, spiritual inhabitants, or the plight of our oceans. Some statement that moves you, inspires you, challenges you, makes you want to believe. But I am not a lyricist nor a poet. I don't do hyperboles, metaphors, or haikus. I create images. Colors, shapes, movement are my world. A world I would like to share with you. Take a moment and breathe. Regain composure and process what you have witnessed as we continue to cast light upon shadows. Be aware you must look close, real close, because it is here, in the ocean's obscurities, that the bizarre denizens of Bali flourish.
Hamdan?
That was impressive.
What do you think about that?
Makes me want to go macro diving now.
There we go. There we go.
Amazing.
It's always fascinating to look back on some of the older work, and just kind of think about the tools I had in place, the skills, the knowledge, and how far I feel I've grown as a shooter in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel like that there is, it doesn't feel like that. It really feels pretty professional. I mean, we've been working together on a project in Siladen together, so I know what is actually going on these days with your things and how you build a studio underwater to actually capture a lot of interesting moments. I think the only problem we have today is that the 45 minutes we're sitting here will probably not be enough, so I'm probably going to speak a lot much faster.
Okay, I can
and
talk
we just
quick
go
too.
to the next slide and ask you the first question that we have, which
do
is, what are the golden tips for shooting the best macro underwater? I thought like we give you the most difficult question in the beginning, like very broad and wide open. So just like, what is it all about? What are the important parameters?
When somebody asks me like golden tips, most important, for me it's less technical and it's more about theory and approach. And I feel that if you really want to grow as a shooter, you got to be persistent. You got to practice. All too often, people do a couple dive trips a year. They throw their camera system in the garage or a closet, and when they pull it out, they can't even focus on salt and pepper shakers in their kitchen. But then they expect to go to a dive destination and shoot shrimp and crab and octopus. It doesn't work like that. You have to be familiar with the gear and you have to be passionate. You got to practice. You got to practice. You got to practice. Of course, you got to invest in equipment. Good cameras, lights, lenses, but that doesn't dictate the results. What we just watched is an HD DSLR from 2012, maybe. I mean, it's older technology. So again, it's not about necessarily the tools. They help, but it's about the shooter and the skill set. So that's really the golden tip.
You know, it also feels like that when you do wide angle things, you go in the water and things come to you, kind of. It feels like in macro, you have to kind of pick, make decisions, have a lot of patience, wait for things, and go towards the environment. Did you say that?
I think anytime you start shooting macro, you get overwhelmed with the plethora, the variety of species. And a term I use is spray and pray. Basically, just start shooting everything you see and just constantly going down the slope, the muck, the reef, shooting everything rather than investing time on one subject. I did the same thing. And I ended up with a lot of fish ID shots. Oh my gosh, it's a frogfish. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Wait, I want to see what's farther down the reef. And if you want to elevate the quality of your images, you gotta set up shop. You gotta stay in one place, and you really gotta work the subject. Granted, the subject has to be, a good species to hang out and let you shoot it. But I agree totally in that respect.
Is that what are the most important things that you have to keep in mind to make a decision? Because I imagine there's an interesting fish, but it's not interesting until it actually does something interesting. So you're going to sit there for like half a day, like 20 minutes or whatever, and then nothing happens. I mean, what is the success rate?
So that's one of the things I love about macro is the creative lighting. And you can take a common species or common subject and make it more fascinating, more appealing to the viewer through creative lighting, whether it's backlight, rim light, three-quarter light, colored light. You don't have to find that black hairy frogfish and hope for, okay, here's the holy grail of subjects. Again, as far as shooting, less is more. It's not about quantity, it's about quality.
Okay.
Putting in the time and the effort.
Just for you guys to know, we have another session with you where we specifically talk about the creative lighting in macro videography. I know Hamdan is already getting excited about it. Yeah, that's super cool.
Is that your excited face?
Yes.
Can I see it one more time?
Yeah.
Okay. Another question. There are several ways to increase magnification. What is the most feasible for underwater videography?
There's a couple things. One, you get a longer lens. 90 mil, 100 mil, 105 millimeter is a great way to get macro and super macro. Obviously, you want to add a diopter. You don't want to shoot it.
What is a diopter?
A diopter is an additional piece of glass that you would attach to your housing for increased magnification. And they come in different strengths, just as the lenses on your camera do. When you increase magnification, especially with a diopter, you have less depth of field, so it becomes incredibly challenging. But when you see images of really, really small critters, or you see eyes that are filling the frame, it's often done with a diopter, so that will increase magnification. You can also take the lens that you have and get closer. All lenses have a minimum focusing distance, and if you're shooting from this far away, but the lens allows you to shoot this far away, getting closer allows you more magnification. The last point that I want to touch on that a lot of people don't utilize or may not even know about is some camera systems have tools built in. For example, I'm a Sony shooter. Sony has a system called Clear Image Zoom. And what it does is it's a camera setting that allows you to crop in on the sensor. Sort of like when you're going from full frame to APS-C. This is a feature that actually lets you kind of zoom in. Now, you wouldn't want to zoom while recording, but if I'm shooting a subject and I just need it to be a little bit tighter, but I don't want to move the camera, my lights are all set up, I can go into this camera setting and just kind of punch in 5%, 10%. And that's one of the tricks I use a lot because the camera's already set up.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, there's not probably an issue with like bad visibility or things like that. So you just,
Yep.
I think, I don't know, if you have a bad vis day, you do macro. Is that something that applies?
Good question.
Definitely.
Okay. Jack asks, what is the best way to focus in macro videography without an external monitor? Manual or which autofocus should I use? Yeah, I mean, you basically touched on it. If you have like even a diopter in front of the lens, then the depth of field changes, and it is only a very narrow layer that you can actually focus in. And I think
it
also,
can be paper thin.
Yeah, and I think it's also something that you utilize artistically because you don't want to have the whole picture completely in focus. You only want to have the little eggs that are like half of a millimeter big or whatever.
Yep.
Okay, so how do you deal with the focus?
So the first part, I guess, is the external monitor part. I've never owned an external monitor. I use the built-in monitor, and again, certain cameras have certain tools. The new mirrorless digital cameras, they have a couple tools like focus peaking and focus magnification. So what it allows you to do, you hit a button, it electronically zooms in or punches in so you can check critical focus. And then there's a tool called focus peaking, which will show on the monitor what is actually in focus. I did touch on it. With Bali close-up, I didn't have those tools. I shot autofocus. So what I would do is I would focus on the sand, let the camera kind of lock in, and then I would rock the camera when I'm shooting the subject. When I thought it was in focus, I would stop rocking the camera and record. The problem there is that what I thought was in focus wasn't always the case. So my keeper rate might have been 50%. How did I deal with that? I would shoot a lot of the same subject. I would shoot it 5, 10, 20 times, and then when in editing, I would pick what was in focus. Sometimes I wanted the eye in focus. It wasn't, but if the subject was doing something cool, I would settle and take it. Now, I much prefer manual focus. Between focus peaking and focus magnification, I can go in, hit a button, check, critically focus manually, and I know the eye is in focus, the claw is in focus, the egg is in focus, and then I can record. What that's allowed me to do is increase my keeper rate. So from 50%, I'm probably up to maybe 90% of keepers that are in focus.
Oh, okay. Why do we have this picture in this one here?
So this picture references the custom functions. If you look at the buttons that have the C on them, C3, C1, C2, most of the cameras today, DSLR, mirrorless, they allow you, even compact, allow you to custom set buttons so that you don't have to mess with the menu. The menus can be clumsy and they cost you time. As you know, we're underwater, 60 minutes, 70 minutes. Time is critical. Also, if there's action that can't be reproduced, you want a shortcut. So I use the custom buttons to get into the settings that I just discussed, focus peaking, focus magnification, with one click of a button.
What do you have on your buttons?
I have focus peaking, which will outline what is in focus in red. I chose red, but the cameras will allow you to pick a color. I have focus magnification. And so my normal workflow is put the camera down on a tripod, kind of get a basic composition. I hit focus magnification. It goes in. I manually focus. It'll automatically go back to the original composition. And again, when I'm doing the focus magnification, it's not recording. It's just basically a tool to check focus. Once it punches back out to the normal composition, I've got focus peaking, which is on, and it identifies what's in focus. It's basically a check system to ensure that what I want sharp is sharp. From there, hit record, kind of hang out, twiddle my thumbs, look around, see if my dive buddy left me. Most of the time he has. And after about 30 seconds, I hit stop. You're one of those guys, huh? You don't wait for the macro
No,
guys?
I just get distracted.
Okay.
Like, oh, fish.
Oh, fish.
God.
So that's kind of the workflow with the custom buttons.
Okay, cool. Interesting. We want to go also a little bit back, not too far back to your early beginnings, but I would say let's go back to the time that I noticed that you exist, because I saw that video.
Okay.
The not so silent world, which for me was kind of a macro game changer. For like 1 second I thought, no, the idea is already done.
Nah.
But it's an amazing idea.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it was, for me, it was basically the first time that like really cool sound design was used to enhance the feeling of being, I don't know, immersed with macro. The not so silent world. Let's have a look at it.
Sure.
It was exciting.
No, I'm done.
That's impressive. It's really impressive.
I always kind of speechless when I see it again and again.
Thank you.
When did you do that?
Maybe 2016, I think.
2 years after he started doing all of this. Okay, cool. Amazing.
You mentioned the sound effects. It was all accidental. I started with one sound effect and realized that I couldn't just have some random sound in the middle of the film. So I added a second and a third.
It doesn't sound random.
But it just happened accidentally. And about 250 hours of editing later, I was able to complete all the sound effects. So love, hate. I think I'm done with sound effects, though.
Yeah, well. Okay, cool. Let's answer another question, this time from Armando. What tip can you recommend to have a steady macro video without the use of a tripod? Is that even like really possible?
It is. You have limitations. Obviously, you can put the camera in the muck. And for those listening or watching that don't know what muck is, it's basically just a generic word for the bottom. It describes, the substrate. And so, sure, you'd never want to put your camera system on coral, but a lot of times we're shooting in sand or mud, and you can put it directly on the bottom, but it's still very difficult to stabilize. Often we're shooting on sandy slopes, so it's kind of leaning. And most importantly, if you don't use a tripod, how do you look at that monitor? Your face has to be basically on the sand with the monitor. So you can handhold it. I don't recommend handholding your system for macro, but tripod is definitely recommended, and you can always shoot higher frame rate. If you shoot 60 frames or 120 instead of the traditional 30. In America, we shoot NTSC, 30 frames. I know there's 25 frames as well. You can slow the footage down, and that'll kind of get rid of some of the bumps. But
okay.
That's what I recommend.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Scuba Mo wants to know. My question for macro videography is how do you determine the best amount of light to use to light up your macro subject without scaring it away? Basically, how do you set up and light a macro scene while keeping the subject around for the shot?
How do you keep the subject around? That's easy. You just get a leash or like a little net, and you just,
oh, come on.
You pin it down. What I do is I try shoot, and if you've looked at that body of work, I shoot subjects that don't move. Now, frogfish still move, octopus move, crabs and shrimp move, but you try and identify subjects that are stationary because they're all going to rest, they're going to feed, they're going to chill. And so if I see a subject that I'm very interested in, but it's on the move, I just keep swimming because it's nearly impossible. You just showcased two of my projects. There's no single reef-dwelling fish in any of my work because it's impossible to shoot a single reef-dwelling fish. So I focus on things like shrimps and crabs, frogfish, octopus. I love cephalopods. Although I include some nudibranchs, I'm not a big nudibranch kind of guy. I know there are people that just
go
flip
crazy.
out, right?
Crazy for nudibranch.
Power to them. It's just not really my thing. So you work with what you have. And again, it's about identifying subjects that aren't moving and setting up shop on those rather than going after subjects that you feel are heavily sought after, but are on the move. So I just keep swimming down the reef.
Okay. Do different critters have different behaviors that you can maybe predict, or I don't know. I mean, if I would be a critter and there would be like a massive camera showing up in front of my door, I would probably freak out for a few minutes and then realize, oh, okay, it's Evan. Or how does it work?
He's back.
There is a stealth mode. I mean, there are times where I'm kind of crawling up on the subject. One of the advantages of video is if you can get the system close, you can hit record and then back off so that it has kind of more of a comfortable feel. But again, often shrimp aren't running away, crabs aren't running away. They're doing what crabs do, which is just kind of
okay, I think there's also an element in the question about the light. Is there like too much light, or is it like, do you have to be sensitive with your light to not disturb the wildlife?
So it's a balance between enough light and your camera settings. Obviously, if you're working with your aperture and you want to close down that aperture and you get more depth of field, you're going to need more light. Sure, you can bump your ISO, but then you have the potential of noise and grain. I lock my ISO at 400 because I feel like anything above that, I have the potential for noise. And so then I just work on shutter speed and aperture. And I like to work with less light if possible. With the final footage, I like to shoot a little dark because I can always bring up my levels in editing. And it does kind of help reduce spooking the animal. But again, a lot of animals, they don't care. Am I using giant 5,000, 10,000 lumen lights? No. Most of what I'm doing is using small cigar lights. So this, for example, is 1,000 lumens. Even on full power, you're not really blasting a subject compared to some of the lights you're using, which are, what, 4 times 12,000? So I don't want to cook the animal. And I don't know if you could necessarily cook it, but there's excessive light for sure.
Okay. I never cooked a whale or a shark.
Not yet.
That's good.
And let's keep
because
it that way.
I know Sea Shepherd is exhibiting like right over there.
No. I mean, wide angle, you need to have way more light, but there's also nothing in front of the light.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a wide angle thing. So just like, thanks for pointing out.
Of course.
We have another one. Do you have any tips for getting very small moving objects, Lembe sea dragons, skeleton shrimp, in focus? Do you use a monopod or a tripod or diopters?
Not a big fan of monopods. You still have a lot of movement. Tripod. With subjects that sway a little bit, what I'll do is I'll shoot them a lot. I'll shoot them 5, 10 times, and hopefully they settle at some point. It's also important to note that you don't have to fill the frame. You don't have to head to toe sea dragon and hope that that's the composition you want. Letting the subject breathe within the frame is good. So for example, if we were to take this as our screen, maybe put them in the lower left and don't fill the frame. You're going to get more in focus by backing off, and it'll help ensure that they are in focus.
And also when it moves, it has a little bit of room before moving out of
Exactly.
Are you able to pan? Like,
it's something I'm trying, but it's very challenging.
Because it's getting very shaky.
Exactly.
Pretty easy?
The other nice thing is if you show more negative space in your image, you can show the habitat that the subject matter's on versus just doing all head to toe. It was something that I did a lot of in my early work, just as close as I possibly can, most magnification. But now I'm trying to mix it up a little bit and leave some negative space.
Talking about tripods, we have this one here. You want to say something about this?
Sure. Initially, I was not a fan of tripods. They have their inherent challenges. It's more gear. It brings the subject, or it brings your camera higher off the bottom. So then you have more of a tendency to be shooting down. And it's important to note that you want to get the lens at eye level most of the time with the subject. So having a big tripod head kind of contradicts that approach. So in the early days, like Bali close up, I didn't use a tripod at all. And then I started to toy with it. And I found a tripod plate that I really liked. It's very simple, it's very low, and I use a variety of ball clamps and arms with it. So most of the time I'm using just standard arms. Here I've illustrated telescoping arms that I can use on steeper slopes, and it allows me to adjust the system.
So these are all the same arms, it's just different.
These are, and then I
size,
think we might have an image of other arms, which are just standard arms. Yeah. And so I attach them to the tripod and I wrap them up around when they're not in use, when I'm swimming down the reef. Typically, I'll do the back arm a little bit longer. So I may do like 8-inch or 10-inch in the front and then an extra 2 inches in the back, because if we're on a slope, I may need the extra length. And yeah.
Cool. Oh, so much theory. Let's watch another video.
Yeah?
Let's do it.
I think you made a new one that you haven't shown anyone.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about it. Do you want to say something about it, or you just want to put it out there?
I don't think anybody's seen it. So, yeah, let's take a look. There's a human element to it. I actually did a little bit of wide angle. You inspired me. So it's a combination of macro and wide angle.
Okay, cool. Let's have a look.
Cool.
What's the name?
The Calling.
The Calling.
Yes.
Perfect. The theme of the show is Follow the Call. Here, so
See?
Thinking ahead.
let's have a look.
Let's take a look.
The Calling from Evan Sherman, premiere. Let's go for it.
The video.
Does it have a long black thing in the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Probably
I
5
messed it up.
seconds.
5 seconds?
Maybe 10.
10
There's-
seconds black?
Well, there's audio.
Here we go.
Let's try it.
Amazing. No, I'm done. What do you think about it?
No, it's pretty cool. It's eye-opening. That's what I was telling Evan. It's crazy. I've got a few questions to ask, but I want to wait till you guys are done because I feel like these are important questions to ask.
No, you want to go ahead?
Okay. So the main thing is, in the Behind the Mask family, I have a reputation of not understanding macro. And I think the whole seriousness behind it is that the way technology has come about, you have people who are videographers all over the world now who can film underwater just because the technology allows us to do so. But for some reason, macro doesn't seem to have caught on, especially with the younger generation, the way, for example, wide angle has, the way we've caught on to it. But sitting here talking to you and watching these videos, and from the questions that we're getting, we're seeing that there is understanding and there's interest in it. And it's this idea that there's all these barriers, that these expensive equipment that we need to buy to do macro. So if you're looking at up-and-coming videographers who see these things and now they realize, wow, this is something I can do. In terms of equipment, what would you recommend? Because now we see that we can get away with a small dive light, with a small tripod. So if you're talking to the young videographers of the world now and you want to get them into macro, what would you say to them?
I'd say just because you shoot macro doesn't mean you only shoot macro.
Exactly.
It's part of the adventure. It's part of the diving experience. Again, I said it can be very rewarding if you like challenges and you like to see things that are different. Not everybody can go chase anacondas in the Amazon. So it's very high reward in the respect that you can go to Southeast Asia or the Caribbean or almost anywhere in the world and see some pretty cool critters. As far as equipment, technology has boomed in the last like 5 or 6 years. The sensors are better. There's better magnification and cheaper diopters. Again, you can buy $100. I mean, these started off as regular dive lights, and they've been kind of honed in for doing video. Use what you have, learn how to master it, and yeah, it may have some limitations, but just practice. And if you're getting the results you want, continue to invest your time in not only equipment, but the dive destinations. I know a lot of people that don't want to do a dedicated macro trip. And I get it, you know. There's this idea of lying in the muck for 4 or 5 hours a day looking at stuff this big. It doesn't have the same thrill that maybe some of the adventures do that, you know, Behind the Mask is doing. But I think there's a bug to it. And what I mean, it becomes very addictive. If you would have told me 7 years ago that I'd be this like, you know, macro enthusiast and, you know, I love it in the muck and I like it tiny, like, no way, man, that's just not my style. So I'd say try it. Don't be intimidated. Be willing to fail, because by failing more and more, you'll be able to build upon that. And eventually you'll get a skill set that you're comfortable with, and you'll get images that you're satisfied with.
So if I'm ready to go into macro tomorrow, what would you say is the basic setup as a young videographer that I would need?
Even point and shoot cameras now have incredible macro capabilities. Some of them have macro settings built in, and without getting too technical, the smaller chips actually have more depth of field. So some of the point and shoot cameras, as far as focusing, have advantages over the full frame cameras. So I would say invest with what you can afford and learn. The best camera you can get is a camera you can afford and the camera you have. Don't have gear envy. If you're watching at home, serious, do not have gear envy. Because if you have a compact camera and you want a mirrorless, you're going to get the mirrorless, and then you're going to want full frame. And after full frame, you're going to want a red. And after red, it never ends. So get what you can afford, master what you can afford, and really work on your skill set.
100% agree. I think that's probably the best advice I've heard you so far.
Yeah. At some point, you have to stop investing in gear and investing in the dive trips.
Yeah.
Because having a red camera but not being able to afford dive trips is going to do you absolutely no good.
Perfect.
Although I kind of do want a red camera.
Okay.
And one last thing, there's a teacher in Turkey who wants to show his videos to the school kids. So where can they see more of your videos?
website, Facebook, Vimeo.
Hey, do you have a macro Monday as well?
Sometimes,
I
if
saw
I'm
your-
around on Monday for a
No,
long
I
time.
saw like you were posting like short macro clips on a specific headline. What is it? What is Macro Monday? No.
Basically, I was doing this thing where every Monday I was posting a different clip.
Oh, that's where I get the idea from. Sorry.
That's okay. We share. I inspired you.
That's
Yes,
it. That's it.
But yeah, a lot of my work can be seen on either the Seasick Productions Facebook page or Evan Sherman.
Perfect. Perfect. Awesome.
Good. Yeah, we burned through the time pretty quick.
We're out of time?
It's 45 minutes, bro.
Oh,
I
man.
can't believe it. Feels like we just started.
Yeah, we're okay. So that's how it is. We're gonna see you again. Do you know when?
24th?
24th. This is Thursday. No, it's Friday, right?
Yeah.
See you
I'll
on
be here.
Friday. Good. And yeah, happy to have you here.
Thank you for the invite.
Well, I think there will be a couple of more questions under this video during the day and maybe tomorrow. So you're going to be there answering everything, right?
Everything?
Yeah.
That'd be great. We're actually getting quite a few questions on YouTube. So if you could reply to them as well, because there's
Sure.
a genuine interest here.
The reason why we
Cool.
ask you here now is because you can't say no.
Yep.
So
And then we
yes,
trap
he's super
you.
happy to do that.
'Cause
what
we're
an
on
amazing
live.
guy. Yeah,
Live
great.
video.
And we continue later on at, 2 o'clock with Simon Buxton, who basically lives right in one of the best macro spots. Talk a little bit about blackwater diving and photography and videography and high speed and macro and things like that as well. So make sure to join in then. And hey, thanks again, Evan. Amazing work.
Thanks a lot, man.
And
Awesome.
we're out. Great.
Thanks a lot, dude. That was a lot of fun.